Everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Serrated Cucumber, and today we're going to be revisiting the Wolf Brothers, specifically the ending of Life is Strange 2. Regardless of the ending you got, I think it's safe to say that all 4 endings of Life is Strange 2, yes, because there are 4, not 7, had us all in some way in some form of emotional wreck. Whether we were jovial, depressed, shocked, or even angry at what our choices had led to, and I think that's the beauty of it. So many of us went different directions with our Wolf Brothers, as it was always our story to tell. That being said, I definitely have my own opinions on the right and best endings, and while I'm sure you do too, remember that this is just my opinion. Whichever ending you got is completely valid, and whichever you choose to accept as canon is completely and utterly your decision. These are just my thoughts and feelings on which endings I thought were the best. As always, there will be major plot spoilers ahead for the story of Life is Strange 2, including all 4 endings. If you haven't played by now, I highly recommend you do, or if you haven't, I can wholeheartedly recommend Eurogamer's playthrough. They're my favourite Life is Strange Let's Players. Without further ado, let's get into the video. I'll be ranking the endings starting with the worst and ending with the best, and they'll be mostly from a story and thematic perspective rather than technical. Number 4. Lone Wolf. You saw this one coming. The absolute worst ending in Life is Strange 2 is Lone Wolf, and here's why. Lone Wolf begins with a low morality Daniel becoming enraged at Sean's refusal to surrender at the border. Daniel has been raised to disregard the law, so Sean's adherence to the police in this scene makes Daniel tired of letting Sean make the decisions and taking matters into his own hands, something he may have previously exercised at Meryl's weed farm or by him attacking Lisbeth in episode 4. Daniel uses his powers to drive the car straight through the border shortly after discovering Sean with a gaping bullet hole in his neck. Now, I want you to think of Sean Diaz at the start of Life is Strange 2. A young boy concerned with scoring a girl at a party, unsure of himself in the way he acts, in his sexuality, sensitive, sheltered, annoyed with his younger brother getting in the way of his life, wanting nothing more than to leave his family behind and hang out with his high school crush Jen, his best friend Lila, a person who cares about him above all else, evident from their phone calls in episode 1 and 2. Sean was just a normal kid in a normal city. Then, the journey embarks on with Daniel, with them huddling for warmth in the forest, arriving at their grandparents in the snow, working together in Humboldt, Sean trekking across the desert, saving Daniel from Haven Point, waking up after a night watching the stars at the Grand Canyon, and now Sean is laying in his driver's seat, his last memory being terrified out of his mind and in a severe amount of pain from being shot in the neck, his blood splattered all over the car seat. Is this what Sean ever deserved? Sean has done nothing but protect himself and Daniel, has been beaten brutally, has endured so much heartbreak, all for his younger brother. To protect him was always the goal. He never deserved to die in such a way. You can even see the exact moment he takes the impact of the bullet in the car if you look closely as he begins clasping at his neck. Lone Wolf is a culmination of your bad choices coming back to haunt you, and in that way it's brilliantly designed. Sean and Daniel can't go on the run acting like criminals and expect an easy surrender at the border. You can't contradict the way you teach Daniel. What this does mean is that Daniel would make his own way to Puerto Lobos and likely grow up as a street orphan, as the newspaper clippings would imply, stealing from people in order to survive, since this is how he would have been taught by Sean to have low morality. This isn't even like Blood Brothers though. Daniel steals 1 million pesos from a bank on top of pickpocketing and making the streets of Puerto Lobos worse. Where in Blood Brothers, there are a few ways to explain the gang attacks on the Diaz family home. It is clear that Daniel has done something serious to aggravate the gang members who attack him on the beach, as it is a targeted attack, not for money, they just want to hurt him. Not only the plight of Sean, but imagine Daniel, alone in a foreign country where he does not speak the language. All of his family is gone, he has no idea how to drive, he has to wipe the blood off his own brother from his hands, but he knows he can never do this in a metaphorical sense. He carries the burden of causing Sean's death all the way to what would be their new home. He would grow up in bitter regret of what he has done to Sean. Look at his eyes, the scars on his sunken face, the sheer anger. This is not the 10-year-old boy we came to know and love. This is a hardened criminal who bears no resemblance resemblance to the smiling child who just wanted a chocolate bar and to play games on his brother's phone. Daniel is unrecognisable. Not to mention the people back home, Karen will have to deal with the knowledge that she sent her son to the border to be killed, the son she only got to reunite with for 7 weeks. She will likely live in horrible regret for the rest of her life, wishing she knew Sean better and questioning her selfishness. Lila would be utterly destroyed. I mean, look at how upset she is about Sean not contacting her for a month, let alone him dying. I doubt that she would be able to cope in any regard, and this is so sad to imagine. Chris would read about how much suffering and pain Daniel caused at the border, how much he has changed, and remember their friendship and confusion about how somebody seemingly so kind to him could end up being a criminal like this. Overall, Lone Wolf is a heartbreaking ending, with Sean gone and Daniel a shell of his former self. Feels central, do not recommend, this is by far the worst ending, let's pretend it doesn't exist.
Daniel, you're not a little wolf anymore. Never forget who you are. Never.
Number 3. Redemption. Let me preface this by saying Redemption was the ending that made me feel the most emotional. I may have some personal bias against this one because I started crying when I watched it and it hurt. I know a lot of people love this ending, but personally I can't accept it. 15 years. 15 years, man. 15 years was always too much for Sean. He is accused and somehow found guilty of a crime he did not commit and is thrown into jail for it, where he will spend just under half of his life serving his sentence. Of course, Daniel gets to live a nice life with Claire and Steven, is absolved of the blame, and Sean gets to walk a free man in America. But of course, each of the good endings has a sacrifice. Sure, Sean is free, but at what cost? He was robbed of so many formative years, entirely missed his late teens and 20s, spending them in jail. He spent his 17th birthday with a prison visit from Daniel. He will never get that time back, and he may be hopeful by the end of it as he still has his life left from the age of 30 onwards, but there is nothing that can feasibly justify, to me, spending half of your life in prison for something you did not commit. This ending is a manifestation of Sean's commitment to ensuring Daniel is safe, and for that I'm happy, but when you consider that Sean has lost so much just for his dad being shot by a police officer, he doesn't deserve to serve this sentence. Not to mention that when he gets out, sure he's a good looking dude, grows his hair back, gets a neat white glass eye which is representative of his purity and good morals, but then there's this overriding sense of catharsis in the scene with Daniel in the woods. Sean is a broken man, his soul and spirit shattered by so many years in jail. He does not seem empowered or happy, he simply seems traumatized, which is evident from the scene with Daniel at the campfire. He gave up everything, literally everything. He never graduated high school, never got to experience university, or the joys of being a young, carefree adult. Karen is much older, his grandparents are likely dead, Daniel, Lila and the rest of his friends likely have careers and degrees, while meanwhile Sean has nothing. He's a shell of his former self and is nowhere ahead in life from where he was at 16 and lost everything. He will find it hard to get a job with a criminal record. Cassidy and Finn will likely have forgotten about him as they will be nearing their middle age by now. Scary to think that Hannah is like in her mid-40s in Redemption. Anyway, my point is, Sean has nothing left for himself except trauma, a younger brother, and probably a supportive mother. I imagine Karen is more integrated into his life at this point, but still. Even more frustrating still is that Daniel and Sean drive in different directions. After everything, Daniel has grown up without his brother, and even though he has a fondness in his heart for Sean, he does not need him anymore, and he has a life of his own, which is tear-jerking. Sean needs Daniel more than anything else, but much like Sean telling Daniel in the flashback in episode 3, he has a life now and needs to get on with things, the exact way Sean used to want to. There is, however, an upside to this ending. As opposed to Lone Wolf, Sean is alive and a free man in America, and nothing can change that unless there's another mysterious telekinetic explosion and he ends up on the run again. Mikhail Koch tweeted on Twitter that Sean in Redemption cannot go back to living in a city, and so becomes like Brody in a way, travelling around the United States voluntarily and presumably drawing a lot of scenery, getting to experience the world through the lens of a free man. Daniel ends up with a degree and then a barista job at Starbucks, which is oddly fitting for a real life scenario. The reunion with Lila also makes this a more bearable ending for me, as she was beloved and extremely missed by Sean, and I'm sure fans too. Not to mention that Sean will likely spend some more time with Karen as adults, where they can form somewhat of a friendship. I take issue with Redemption for the reason that I can't accept those 15 years where Sean is in prison. No part of me is okay with letting him suffer through all that. After all he's been through, he doesn't deserve it. He's already been dealt such a hard hand in life. There is also a huge logical flaw besides the fact that no jury could ever convict convict Sean with the lack of evidence that he killed the police officer. The flaw is that somebody who shot Meryl and shot Elizabeth to death will receive the same sentence as somebody who made a conscious effort to have a good gameplay, which is why I would propose tiered redemption endings, for example different sublevels of morality pertaining to the higher side. For example, if Sean has committed no optional crimes, he should receive 6 years in prison, and if he killed Elizabeth or shot Meryl or admitted to the heist being his idea, he would receive 15. It isn't fair to him to suffer through 15 years, especially if he's entirely innocent. I would be more okay with this way of things, although redemption would still be a sad ending. Sean deserves better, which brings me on to the penultimate ending, the second best. I'm going to preface this by saying that I love both of the endings to come, and it was incredibly difficult to pick a winner of the two.
We can go now.
Yeah. Let's go home.
Number 2, Blood Brothers. There is nothing that brings me joy more than seeing Sean and Daniel together. They're brothers, they love each other, they deserve each other. So in this regard, Blood Brothers offers a happy ending. But at what cost? Well, Blood Brothers is representative of a full metamorphosis of Sean and Daniel. They are not the charming little boys who were lost in the forest and were scared out of their minds. They are hardened, stoic, and a little scary. It's hard to see the inner mind of the soft, sensitive Sean we had once come to know through the countenance of the one we are greeted with in Blood Brothers. For example, in Redemption, Sean still looks like himself a lot more. He has his episode 2 and 5 hair back and looks mostly the same. However, in Blood Brothers, he looks completely different. 6 years have certainly changed him. Blood Brothers, however, is the closest representation to an ending where materially, Sean and Daniel achieve with their goals. They get to go to Mexico, they live in their own house, considerably wealthy and likely living comfortably. Sean and Daniel seem to be living in a sizable home of their own, they open a repair shop business, which all seems well at the surface level here. If you had just told me Sean and Daniel end up in Mexico together in their dad's old home when we were predicting ending possibilities a while ago, I would have taken you for a jokester. However, it seems that in one of the endings they get what they want. But is this what they need? There is a little bit of disillusionment with Puerto Lobos. It's implied that the crime rate there is relatively high, given the gang attacks on the Diaz family home. There is also the implication that Sean and Daniel have been stealing to survive, and that they may be vigilantes, defending themselves under the guise of their own power rather than relying on local law enforcement. In any event, this is consistent with a low morality playthrough. However, there are multiple shortcomings with this ending, which sadden me to see. For example, Daniel likely grew up for a few years in Mexico not knowing the language and feeling very ostracized in society. Sean may not actually have any family in the country anymore, although this is unlikely, and overall Daniel might not actually be happy there. It is implied a few times throughout the series that Daniel is not actually fully on board with the Mexico plan at all. In episode 3, Sean mentions to Finn that Daniel doesn't want to go at all and instead wants to go to Karen and live with her in Arizona. In the same episode, Daniel also says that he doesn't care about Puerto Lobos, and in episode 5 he questions Sean on it, that they're strangers to Mexico. Daniel can't speak Spanish, and it instills this overarching doubt and dread of Mexico. In a low morality playthrough, I don't think Daniel wants to break through the border because he wants to go across, he rather wants to do it because he doesn't want the police to stop him, and doesn't want his brother to get arrested. This is evidenced in the line, "We can't let them get us." Sean is taken aback by the situation, yet Daniel seems enraged at the police, wanting to annihilate the roadblock. It's sad because in another place in time, Daniel would be sensitive and caring, not wanting to hurt anybody at the roadblock. Blood Brothers is also sad in the aspect that it largely neglects the supporting cast of characters in the series. It leaves no room for Cassidy, Finn, or Lila, all of whom are likely shocked at the massacre at the border. Daniel is completely detached from the little boy who wore princess pajamas and was happy to stay with his grandparents, who are also probably deeply ashamed in the boys too. Karen is likely proud of them for doing what they needed to achieve their freedom. However, what would Chris think? And think of Agent Flores. I know she isn't very liked within our fandom, but think of how her young son and mother would react upon learning that she'd been killed at the border. It would destroy their lives, and it isn't fair to Daniel to take life in order to achieve his goals on a moral level. However, as the brothers look off into the sunset, there is this sweet serenity, and this consensus of we did what we had to, we made it, and now we're safe. The brothers get to live together, free of prosecution and separation, and I'm glad that they can live this new life together, as different as it may be, as I said in my video on Blood Brothers. While the skies may not always be clear, there is certainly hope for the Diaz brothers yet. However, they are forever tainted by their crimes and moral shortcomings, and it is not an unfair assessment to say that they have been bad people to get to where they are today. Overall, Blood Brothers is morally complicated, but due to the damages to Sean and Daniel in a sense of them as people, and their total detachment to everything that used to make up their lives, I can't say that it's my favourite ending, although it does come very close due to the fact that Sean and Daniel are together and can support one another. So that leads us to number 1.
I'm sorry, Sean, but I have to go.
What? What are you talking about?
Don't turn back for me.
Daniel!
I hope you'll be happy in Mexico.
Parting ways. Slightly less bittersweet, happy in some regards, but still not without its fatal flaw. Parting Ways was my initial ending that I got on my first playthrough, and I view it as a more preferable alternative to Redemption. Daniel gets to stay in the USA while Sean gets to roam and go to Mexico. There are a lot of reasons why I like this ending, so let's get into them. The main point against Parting Ways is the bitter sadness that the brothers are apart. Life is Strange 2 has reinforced this constant message of the brothers truly needing one another, that one is not as strong without the other. Daniel needs Sean and vice versa, as evidenced in episode 4, and so while Parting Ways sees both of the brothers relatively happy, they are not together. They're separated by miles and miles of land, and there is the possibility that they may never see one another again. Sean will miss out on seeing Daniel grow up, Daniel will lose his older brother who was there for him through everything, and the two will not be able to heal together but will have to go it alone. This just breaks my heart in the way that the Wolf brothers are apart. This is the sacrifice of a happy ending. Just as the sacrifice in Redemption is 15 years and the sacrifice in Blood Brothers is the boy's innocence and integrity, Parting Ways, while being the happiest ending at surface value, arguably has the biggest sacrifice of the three. We don't count Lone Wolf among these because there is no sacrifice, only bitter loss. The thing is, their lives are so different from one another. However, these different lives are good in the way that they're each culminations of the things that make each of the Diaz brothers happy. Let me explain. Throughout the entire game, Daniel has gravitated naturally, regardless of your moral choices, towards order, structure, family, and safety, as evidenced by his love of living with Claire and Steven under their rules, his indoctrination to Haven Point, and his discomfort at the Drifter camp in episode 3, where he clearly doesn't like the lack of structure and the more adult nature of the camp. Sean, however, is the opposite. He can't stand living with the Reynolds because of his lack of freedom as a teenager, and he struggles drastically to the point of lashing out at Claire over her iron-fisted rules. The two clearly do not see eye to eye on their ideal lives, and this is why Parting Ways is so perfect. Sean gets to live in Mexico, connecting with his father's heritage. Daniel was never really interested in the Mexico plan in the same way that Sean was. Look at the way Sean can try and convince Daniel that going to Mexico is the right thing to do. He depicts it as a place where they can relax, have their own home and stop running from the police. Daniel sees it as a safe haven, an escape from what they've been running from. However, Sean on the other hand sees Mexico as a chance to pay honour to his father, and an opportunity to live independently without the shackles of rules or regulations. Sean speaks Spanish, so he sees it as a new home, whereas Daniel sees it as the exact same way he saw the Reynolds home, away, and even a Haven Point briefly. A place where he is safe, cared for, and sheltered. Sean gets his dream by going to Mexico, and can even be joined by Finn or Cassidy, depending on your romance options in episode 3, people who helped him discover himself and who he is. Mexico for Sean is a culmination of his coming-of-age tale, the crescendo in a series of steps towards him turning away from the light, becoming adult. The Diaz brothers may have also had family in Mexico, and it's implied that Sean is having a good, happy life by the pictures he sent. He may have even developed an interest in Polaroid photography, much like Max Caulfield. I'm personally happy with Sean's situation in Mexico. Daniel, on the other hand, he gets to go back to the Reynolds, with a friend his age, where his grandparents will take care of him. His life will be one of hot showers, pancakes for breakfast, attending school with Chris, helping Steven with his model trains, going to visit his mother in the desert, having the life he really should have always had. He gets to make his own decision for the first time, which was a point of complaint in episode 3, which he has at the beginning of the episode. Daniel remarks during the telling of the wolf story in the 5th episode that it's his story too. Obviously, his rendition of the story through the eyes of a child is optimistic, naive, and very hopeful considering what actually happens at the border, but he's right about the fact that he can change his own story. He respected Sean's wish and got him through the border, shoving the cars out of the way, but taking precise care not to hurt anybody. Daniel knew in that moment that Mexico was not for him, and he saw it out. Obviously, this would hurt Sean, but he's a growing kid. A theme throughout episode 5 is independence, with multiple references to the 4th of July, and the fact that the brothers, one way or another, will develop some form of independence through the endings. In parting ways, this is manifested through Daniel's ability to finally be the one to make an important decision, and to go back to where he truly wants to be, with his grandparents and Chris living in America. Another amazing thing about Parting Ways is the influence it has on the side characters of the game. This ending does not just favour the happiness of the Diaz brothers, but of others as well. Think about it. Prior to the events of Life is Strange 2, Karen and her parents were estranged, not knowing how to reconcile their truly broken relationship. Yet in Parting Ways, Daniel does not only tear down the barrier between countries, but the barrier between hearts. Karen and Claire are shown to be on good terms, with Claire delighted to take the phone from Daniel. Claire and Steven likely visit away with Daniel, or at least drive him there. Karen's room is also shown to have the curtains open, unlike in episode 2 where it was hidden. I'd imagine that Daniel likely lives in this room now, which is nice. Not to mention that Chris, the lonely boy with a big imagination, finally gets a best friend he can count on. He grows up healthily and happily with Daniel, and they likely remain firm friends into adulthood, as shown and referenced in Redemption. In addition to this, Agent Flores and all of the agents at the border are spared, as opposed to Lone Wolf or Blood Brothers. Daniel gets to live his happy childhood, and not at the expense of Sean losing his formative years of young adulthood. Parting Ways, however, is not goodbye. This is so long, not goodbye. You see, Sean and Daniel do keep in contact through letters, and it is at least implied that Daniel reciprocates this contact. I would imagine that they would video call too. It's important to acknowledge that while Sean and Daniel may be brothers, they both want different things from life, as shown in Redemption, will want to go their separate ways eventually, which is what pains me about Blood Brothers. Daniel will find it significantly harder to leave Sean with no education, job, or prospects as a fugitive in Mexico, whereas by staying in America, he leaves a lot of room open for himself. Overall, Parting Ways is my favourite ending. It shows that the brothers grow to be good people, and unlike Redemption, does not sacrifice Sean's youth. Daniel gets to live a happy childhood and grow up with his grandparents and a new best friend as a law-abiding citizen, the way things always should have been. I should also mention that it isn't completely absurd to suggest that Sean and Daniel would meet again. I know it's a bit stupid that the FBI have placed a tracker on Daniel in case he ever visits Sean again, given that they should know where he is. The fact that they have enough evidence to convict him of a crime he didn't commit, but don't have enough evidence to find out that he's gone to Mexico is insane. Sean's father lived there, Daniel had a t-shirt with Space Mission to Puerto Lobos written on it, there are likely recordings of Sean saying he's going to go there to Carla and Diego, etc. It's crazy. However, as with some high-profile FBI cases where people go dark enough longer to be presumed dead, Sean could simply hide under the radar until the FBI closes case, meaning that Daniel's tracker would be removed and he would be free to visit Mexico. Not to mention that if Sean managed to get a Mexican passport sorted out, he and Daniel could easily visit each other in Canada or Europe on a vacation. I would imagine that they'd keep the ankle tracker on Daniel for 10 to 20 years before removing it, but once they do, the Diaz brothers are free to meet again, and Sean is totally free from persecution. As is stated multiple times throughout the game, nothing can separate the Wolf brothers truly, not walls or land. They will meet again, and in this regard, the best part of all endings are given to the brothers in Parting Ways. Daniel gets to grow up with his grandparents in Oregon, with a life somewhat familiar to living with Esteban. He gets Chris, Lila will probably come and visit him, and he gets to know his mother, who he's always felt estranged from. Sean gets to live happily and in peace with his love interest. Yes, they may be torn apart, but I don't believe that this is forever, and I'd rather the interim period of them being separated had Sean living on the beach drinking cocktails out of coconuts than in a jail cell crying himself to sleep. And with that, I rest my case. Let me know what you guys think of the endings, and give your personal rankings in the comments below. I'm glad to be making content again after my hard drive failure a while ago, and I feel an inspiration to make content again. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. Be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed, and join the Wolf's Discord server for Life is Strange 2 discussion, which will be in the description. And follow me on Twitter, where I post low quality memes and headcanons. But above all, remember to keep your cucumbers serrated, and have a nice day. Bye guys!